Dear comrades, we greet all of you, and special thanks to the organizers of this camp on behalf of the Russian Communist Workers' Party for inviting us and for this opportunity to share our position among comrades. This is not the first forum devoted to the problem of ongoing wars and the rise of fascism that we are taking part in. This camp has gathered many activists representing left-wing and progressive organizations in various countries. This is reasonable and natural, as all well-brought-up people stand by against the brown plague, especially against those who identify themselves as followers of Hitler's allies, such as Bandera or Shukhevich, known in the history of Ukraine. We stand up against those who put people on fire in the Odessa Trade Union's house in 2014, against those who was trying to ban speaking mother tongue, who called to hand Russians Moskaliaku Nagilyaku, and who sent nationalist punitive detachments to Donbass, killing over 15,000 people by 2022, most of them civilians. We are all united in our resistance to fascism reborn, for sure. The question still remains, why do we have major differences among the left-wing forces, even among the communist parties and anti-fascist organizations? These differences are most clearly seen in those comrades' stance against Russia's totally unacceptable invasion of Ukraine. How come those good comrades, honest communists, after all, we cannot classify the KKE and their allies as traitors or agents of imperialism, how they can fall to uncover Russia's defensive action in the special military operation, did not see the defensive component of Russia in the special military operation. They failed to determine, as Lenin guided, the real essence of this particular war. They stumbled upon the fact that all capitalist countries nowadays have monopoly capitalism, the major and foremost feature of imperialism. So, as it works for them, these are imperialist forces that fight on both sides. None of those sides should be supported. Rather, we are supposed to stand up against the belligerent sides, just as in 1914-1916. And this is exactly what they are doing. Their actions against war and NATO are good. What's bad is that they assert the liability for this war should be shared equally between Russia and NATO, thereby diverting people's focus on the main culprit, the principal source of threat inciting a third world war, namely the US and NATO imperialism. To determine the real essence of the war against Russia, we have to analyze all the previous policies towards the Russian Federation, starting with 2022, is not enough. We have to go back to 1991 at least. Dismemberment of the Soviet Union, encirclement by NATO forces, decline in economic potential and technical level of production. Finally, the cultivation of Nazism in Ukraine and its incitement against Donbass and Russia. You just cannot ignore this and lift responsibility from the external aggressor, as this would weaken the joint front of our struggle, let alone this would repel many allies among social democratic forces and other allies, not purely communist, such as WEP, World Anti-Imperialist Platform. The latter were classified nearly as imperialist agents by those comrades just because of the fact they were not orthodox Marxists. We have held theoretical discussion with comrades within SolidNet, in particular at the two last international meetings of communist and workers' parties in Havana and Izmir, and with full responsibility we declare that this is due to comrades' understanding and defining fascism just as some bad thing, the horrors of imperialism, or just a form of slander against aggressors, but fail to uncover its essence as product of imperialism in concrete conditions. Meanwhile, these were communists within Comintern who, on the basis of Leninist theory of imperialism, foresaw fascism, derived the scientific definition of fascism by Georgy Dimitrov, and came up with the tactics of the popular front struggles that comrades do not understand or recognize. The Anti-Comintern Pact was established by Hitler for the very reason to combat against communists and against the spread of socialism. The error adopted by comrades from the KKE is theirs and their supporters is due to misunderstanding of the Leninist theory of imperialism. First of all, due to ignoring the fact that the most developed and most predatory imperialist states have singled out to plunder the rest of the world simply by making money, resulting to brute force to secure this process. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine are the victims that all make up this chain. And this bunch of predators is headed by US and NATO imperialism. To support our conclusion concerning this imperialist core, we point out that the pack of predators that supports and feeds the Ukrainian Nazis is the same one that supports Zionist Israel in its policy of genocide towards Palestine and the Gaza Strip. Concerning the theory of imperialist pyramid, whereby all countries are imperialist to one extent or another, so the war is equally imperialist for all sides, breaks apart when assessed, as practice refutes it. As Lenin pointed out, quote, the negation of all possible national wars under imperialism is theoretically and historically incorrect and in practice promotes European chauvinism. The end of quote. Therefore, the special military operation carried out by the Russian Federation is defensive in character in relation to the peoples of Donbass and Russia, and bears national liberation and anti-fascist components. On the contrary, the military defeat of the Russian Federation, the split of Russia, or a replay of what happened in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, are certainly not in the interests of the Russian working class or of the world working class. There is no doubt that there is fascism in Ukraine. They call themselves the ideological heirs of Hitler's comrades, that they admit that they are fascists. Is it Ukrainian? Yes, that's right, but only in the place of manifestation, in language and in personal, and in origins and financing. It is quite Western, American and European. It was they who fed and set the Kiev Nazis on. The fact that today there are some disputes between the initiators of the project does not change the essence of the matter. It was the same in the 20th century when the fascist beast beat its owner. Thus, the main source of aggression and the source of fascism's cultivation today, the main danger to the world comes from US imperialism and its NATO satellite, which, having formed the predatory core of imperialism, are pursuing the same aggressive policy in other regions of the world, including unleashing a massacre in Palestine, carrying out a reactionary coup in Syria, escalating the situation in different regions of the world. With the change of faces in power in the USA, essentially nothing has changed. There is no need to rush to enroll Trump as an ally of the fighters against the Ukrainian Nazis, to present him as a dove of peace. Today's external, more calculated for the public and resulting from the election campaign, Trump's turn to conclude a truce, is explained primarily by the existence of contradictions in the camp of imperialism, the desire of the United States to solve its economic problems through war, militarization and economic suppression of both Ukraine and competitors, including from the European Union. In the internal struggle of imperialists, many are already ready to sacrifice the figure of Zelensky to exchange for the material goods, the right to extract rare earth metals or other minerals, the operation of walking pipelines and other resources. That is, both often open bargaining and quite possibly the division of Ukraine is being proposed and is already underway. At the same time, the Central Committee of the RCWP notes that if the statements of the Russian authorities correctly express concerns about a repeat of the history of the Minsk agreements, then this must be agreed with. But the fact that, just like in the Minsk agreement, we are actually talking about agreements with active living fascists, and not only in Kiev, but also in the camp of Western imperialism, the USA and the EU, this point is being hidden from the attention of the peoples of Russia and Ukraine in every possible way, which is contrary to their fundamental interests. Speaking out in favor of using any and all opportunities to stop hostilities and prevent further casualties, primarily among ordinary soldiers and civilians, the Central Committee of the RCWP categorically demands that the issue of the sources and bearers of the ideas and policies of Nazism is in Ukraine not be blurred. The Bandera punitive forces, as well as their ideologists and patrons, must be subjected to fair but severe punishment. The fascist regime in Kiev must be destroyed. And finally, we must say what the communists of Russia can and must say. The guilt of the bourgeois class in Russia in creating the situation that resulted in a war between fraternal nations is undeniable. Beginning with the counter-revolutionary coup in 1991, the liquidation of Soviet power and socialism, and continuing with attempts to shift the blame for the massacre onto the Bolsheviks and Lenin personally. Here we do not fully share the position of our comrades from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation that the Russian authorities are defending the so-called Russian world that the West has attacked. The imperialists are fighting for their hegemony against the Russian, Palestinian, Chinese world, etc. And the Russian bourgeois class is fighting for its right to be masters of the Russian world and to exploit the national and labor resources of the Russian and other peoples without restrictions and sanctions. At the same time, the RCWP emphasizes that one of the reasons for the revival of fascism in Ukraine, necessary feature of fascism of any modification in any country is anti-communism. Just like with the Hitler fascists, who began with the creation of the Anti-Comintern Pact, manifestations of anti-communism and anti-Sovietism are also present in Russia. Here we have the renaming of cities and streets, the distortion of historical truth, and the glorification of reactionaries, including fascist philosophers. Therefore, the RCWP, like communists all over the world, demands that the decisive rebuff be given to any attempts to implement a policy of anti-communism or decommunization not only in Ukraine. Repeal of the law banning the Communist Party and laws of the infringement of the Russian language, prohibition of the glorification of Banderovцы, prevention of the demolition of monuments and their restoration, renaming the streets, settlements, etc. But also in other countries where manifestations of anti-communism are also observed, including here in Russia. To conclude, without theory, it is impossible to understand the essence of the struggle against fascism. Fighting fascism without fighting imperialism is pointless. Fighting living fascism is the task of all decent people here and now, resorting all the methods available and involving all possible allies. Communists have always been a vanguard of this struggle, so be it again. Join the ranks of those involved in this struggle. Thank you for listening.